A beautiful sanitation worker went to collect trash at the mansion. Then the owner came out and made a bold proposal. Melissa Johnson never imagined that an ordinary Monday would completely change the course of her life. For 3 years, she had worked as a sanitation worker for the New York City government, always proud of her honest work, even though she faced scornful looks from some people who saw her as just another invisible urban cleaning employee. On that March morning, she was covering for her colleague Michael, who had fallen ill on the Upper East Side route. When she arrived at mansion number 847, an imposing structure with well-kept gardens and wrought iron gates, Melissa noticed something different. For the first time in all the months Michael had been on that route, someone was watching from the window. It was a man around 50 years old, with graying hair at his temples, wearing a dark suit even though it was still early in the morning. Melissa collected the trash with her usual care, properly separating the recyclables, when she heard hurried footsteps behind her. She turned and saw the homeowner walking toward her with an expression that mixed nervousness and determination. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice slightly trembling. "Could you spare a few minutes of your time?" Melissa looked around, confirming he was really speaking to her. It wasn't common for residents of that neighborhood to address sanitation workers except to complain about something. "Of course, sir. Is there an issue with the collection?" she asked, removing her orange cap and letting her brown hair fall loose over her shoulders. The man hesitated for a moment, as if gathering the courage to speak. "My name is Richard Sullivan. I own this house and, well, I'd like to make you an offer. A job offer." Melissa raised her eyebrows, surprised. A job offer? She already had a job and was satisfied with it. "What kind of offer, Mr. Richard?" "I need a personal assistant, someone I can trust to help me with important matters, and I'd like to offer you this position." The 28-year-old woman felt a mix of confusion and suspicion. Why would a wealthy man offer a job to a sanitation worker he didn't even know? "Sir, I appreciate it, but I don't understand. You don't know me. How can you want to hire me?" Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Melissa noticed was nervous. "I know it seems strange, but I've been watching your work for a few weeks. You have a care, a dedication that's rare to see. You treat every task with respect, even when no one is watching." "But sir, I already have a job, and I'm proud of it." "I understand and respect that. That's exactly why I'm making this offer. The salary would be 5 times what you currently earn." Melissa felt her heart race. 5 times more. That would completely change her life and that of her mother, Mrs. Dorothy, who was 62 and suffering from arthritis. But something about this situation didn't add up. "Mr. Richard, with all due respect, why would you make such an offer to someone you don't know? There must be hundreds of qualified people looking for this kind of work." Richard lowered his eyes, and Melissa sensed there was something deeper behind this proposal. "That's exactly why I'm offering it to you, because you didn't seek me out, because you don't know who I am or how much money I have. That gives me a sense of security I don't have with anyone else." "You're talking about security. Security from what?" "From people who pretend to care about me out of self-interest." There was a sadness in Richard's voice that deeply touched Melissa. Even so, she remained cautious. "Mr. Richard, I really appreciate the offer, but I need to think about it. I need to better understand exactly what you expect from a personal assistant." Of course. You have every right to think it over. Just, could you come back tomorrow at the same time? That way I could explain better." Melissa hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no right away, but another part was curious. And that sadness in the man's eyes intrigued her. "All right. I can come back tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you so much." As Melissa finished her route, she couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. 5 times more money. That would mean she could get better health insurance for her mother, maybe even go back to school. When she got home, a small 2-room house in Brooklyn, she found Mrs. Dorothy preparing lunch, even with her hands aching from arthritis. "Mom, I've told you to rest when I'm not here. I'll take care of the food when I get back." "Oh, sweetheart, staying still is what makes me feel worse. At least cooking makes me feel useful." Melissa hugged her mother gently. Dorothy had raised her alone. working as a housekeeper her whole life after her husband abandoned them when Melissa was just 5. "Mom, something happened today," Melissa began but hesitated. It was better not to get her hopes up until she understood the situation better. "What is it, dear?" "Nothing, Mom. Just an unusual day at work." That night, Melissa barely slept. She kept wondering what Richard Sullivan really wanted and whether it would be safe to accept an offer like this, coming out of nowhere. The next morning, she arrived at the mansion at the agreed time. Richard was already waiting, this time dressed more casually but still elegant. "I'm glad you came," he said, and Melissa noticed he seemed more relaxed. "I always keep my word, Mr. Richard." "Please just call me Richard." "I'd prefer to keep it formal if you don't mind." Richard smiled, and Melissa realized it was a genuine smile. "That's fine. Would you like to come inside to talk? That way, I can explain my proposal better." Melissa hesitated. Entering a stranger's house wasn't a good idea. "We can talk here in the garden if you don't mind." "Of course, in fact, I'll get us some coffee. Would you like some?" "Yes, thank you." Richard went inside and returned a few minutes later with a tray holding 2 cups of coffee and some cookies. Melissa noticed his hands trembled slightly as he poured the coffee. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. "Mr. Richard, are you all right? Your hands are shaking." Richard looked at his hands and sighed. "That's part of what I wanted to talk to you about. Melissa, that is your name, right?" "Yes, Melissa Johnson." "Melissa, I'm sick. I have a condition that affects my nervous system. Over time, I'll gradually lose control of my movements." Melissa felt a tightness in her chest. Now she understood the man's nervousness better. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Richard." "Thank you. That's why I need someone I can trust to help me organize some important things before my condition gets worse." "What kind of things?" "Documents, business matters, some family issues I need to resolve." "But sir, for those kinds of things, wouldn't it be better to hire a lawyer or an accountant?" Richard laughed bitterly. "Melissa, you have no idea what it's like to have money and be sick. Suddenly everyone becomes family. Everyone wants to help. Everyone has wonderful suggestions about how you should handle your assets. Are you saying people are getting close out of self-interest?" "I'm saying I've discovered things about people I once trusted that have made me very suspicious. That's why I prefer someone from the outside, someone who has no interest in my assets." Melissa took a sip of her coffee, thoughtful. The situation was starting to make more sense, but there was still something bothering her. "Mr. Richard, do you have family?" "I have a daughter, Jennifer. She lives abroad." "And does she know about your condition?" Richard lowered his eyes again, and Melissa realized she had touched a sensitive spot. "No, we had some disagreements. We haven't spoken in almost 2 years." "Disagreements about what?" "About her choices, about the man she chose to be with." Melissa was beginning to understand the picture. A wealthy, sick father, isolated from his daughter over family issues, surrounded by opportunistic people. "Mr. Richard, have you ever thought about reaching out to your daughter, talking to her about your situation?" "I've thought about it, but I don't know if she'd want to listen." "You can't know unless you try." Richard looked at Melissa with an expression that mixed surprise and admiration. "You're right, but for that I'd need help, someone I trust who could support me through this process." Melissa was starting to grasp what Richard truly needed, not just a personal assistant, but someone to help him rebuild his family life. "Mr. Richard, if I agree to help you, there are a few things you need to understand. First, I won't leave my current job. Second, I can only help you in my free time. Third, I want complete transparency about your situation." "So you accept?" "I accept helping you, but I won't accept 5 times the pay. If you really want to pay me, give me a fair rate for the hours I work for you." Richard smiled, and this time, Melissa noticed tears in his eyes. "You're a special person, Melissa Johnson. Just someone who knows the value of honest work." In the following days, Melissa began visiting Richard's home 3 times a week, always after her job as a sanitation worker. Richard showed her a series of documents and contracts that needed organizing and explained his financial situation in detail. He owned a construction company inherited from his father and had built a real estate empire over the years. But since learning of his illness 2 years ago, he had stepped back from the business, leaving management in the hands of executives and partners. The problem, Richard explained during one of their conversations, is that some people close to me have been pressuring me to sign power of attorney documents, transfers, things like that. They say it's to make things easier when I can no longer manage anything. And you suspect these people don't have good intentions? I've uncovered conversations, emails. Melissa, I found out my own brother, along with 2 cousins, is planning to have me declared mentally incompetent to take control of my assets. Melissa felt a chill in her stomach. The situation was more serious than she had imagined. But you're perfectly lucid. How could they do that? With my illness, they'd argue I'm unfit to make important decisions, and with Dr. Friend's biased psychiatric evaluations, is that even legal? Unfortunately, with the right connections and strategy, it's possible. That's why I need to organize everything before it's too late. Melissa realized she was dealing with something far more complex than she'd expected. This wasn't just about helping a sick man. It was about protecting him from potential family fraud. Mr. Richard, what exactly do you want to do? I want to ensure my daughter gets what's rightfully hers. I want to make some donations to causes I believe in, and I want to protect myself from these vultures circling around. And your daughter, Jennifer. That's another problem. Since our fight, she's completely cut ties. She won't take my money, doesn't want anything to do with inheritance, nothing. What exactly did you fight about? Richard sighed deeply before answering. Jennifer fell in love with a simple young man, an electrician. When they decided to get married, I said things I shouldn't have. What kind of things? I questioned his intentions, said she was being naive, hinted that he was only interested in the family's money. And was he? No. I found out later that the young man, David, didn't even know about the family's money when he fell for her. Jennifer had hidden our financial situation precisely to make sure he liked her for who she was. Melissa began to understand the complexity of the situation better. A protective father who had hurt his daughter out of prejudice, now isolated and vulnerable. Where does she live now? In London. She works as a freelance translator, married David a year ago. I found out by chance, through a photo a mutual friend posted on social media. Did you try to reach out after learning about the marriage? I tried, sent flowers, a letter apologizing. She returned everything unopened. Melissa realized this was the central issue that needed resolving. Richard needed his daughter not just for legal matters, but for emotional ones. Mr. Richard, would you give me permission to try contacting your daughter? Richard looked at her surprised. You'd do that? If you allow me, I'd try talking to her. Maybe a third party, someone neutral, could explain the situation. But how? She doesn't answer calls, doesn't reply to emails. Leave that to me. First, I need to understand her situation in London better. Melissa spent the following days researching Jennifer Sullivan. She discovered she did work as a translator, had a small apartment in London's historic district, and seemed to be living a simple life, far from the wealth she'd left behind in the United States. Through social media, she learned Jennifer visited a specific cafe every morning before work. That's where Melissa planned to make first contact. But first, she needed to convince Richard to pay for a trip to London. When she presented the idea, he grew emotional and wanted to come along. Mr. Richard, you can't just show up unannounced. That could make things worse. Let me talk to her first, lay the groundwork. You're right. But Melissa, this is asking too much. I can't let you travel to another country for my sake. You can and will, because if you don't, your daughter may never know you're sick, and you may never get the chance to reconcile with her. Richard agreed, and a week later, Melissa was on a plane to London. It was her first time traveling outside the United States, an experience both thrilling and frightening. She arrived in London on a rainy Thursday in April. Staying at a small hotel near Jennifer's cafe, she spent the first day just observing, learning the young woman's routine. Jennifer Sullivan was a 32-year-old woman with short brown hair, dressed simply but elegantly. Melissa saw her arrive at the cafe around 8 each morning, usually accompanied by a tall, friendly-looking man, presumably David. On Friday, Melissa made her move. When Jennifer sat alone, David had left for work, she approached the table. "Excuse me, are you Jennifer Sullivan?" Jennifer looked up, startled. "Yes, that's me. You are—" "My name is Melissa Johnson. I came from the United States. I need to talk to you about your father." Jennifer's expression shifted instantly, from surprise to coldness. "I have nothing to say about Richard Sullivan. Please, just give me 5 minutes. It's very important." "Did he send you here?" "He doesn't even know I'm here. I came on my own." That seemed to catch Jennifer's attention. "What do you mean, on your own? May I sit down?" Jennifer hesitated, but nodded. Melissa sat across from her and took a deep breath before speaking. "Jennifer, your father is sick. Very sick. What do you mean by sick?" "He has a degenerative neurological condition. Over time, he's losing control of his movements." Melissa saw Jennifer's expression change again, now a mix of concern and suspicion. "And who exactly are you? A doctor? A nurse?" "I'm a sanitation worker. I clean the streets in New York City." Jennifer looked even more confused. "A sanitation worker? What does a sanitation worker have to do with my father?" Melissa then told the whole story, how she met Richard, the proposal he made, the discovery of his illness, the greedy relatives' plans, everything. Jennifer listened silently, and Melissa noticed tears in her eyes. "He's really sick?" "Yes. And he's alone. And he's scared." "Scared of what?" "Scared of being robbed by people he trusted. Scared of not reconciling with you before it's too late." Jennifer wiped her eyes with a napkin. "Melissa, you don't understand. It wasn't just an argument. My father said things that really hurt. He told me, and he deeply regrets it. But how can I be sure this isn't just a strategy to get me back? Because he doesn't even know I'm here. And if it were a strategy, he wouldn't send a sanitation worker to do the dirty work. He'd send an expensive lawyer or a close relative." Jennifer smiled for the first time since the conversation began. "You're right. That's exactly the kind of crazy thing only Richard Sullivan would do. So, will you talk to him?" "I need to think. And I need to talk to my husband." "Of course. I understand." Jennifer studied Melissa curiously. "Can I ask why you're doing this? Why would someone who barely knows my father go to all this trouble?" Melissa thought for a moment. "Because I've seen the sadness in his eyes when he talks about you. Because I have a mother I love dearly, and I know how terrible it would be to be apart from her. And because I believe everyone deserves a second chance." "You seem like a very special person, Melissa Johnson. Just someone who believes family is the most important thing in the world." Jennifer agreed to think it over and promised an answer in 2 days. Melissa spent the weekend exploring London, trying not to dwell on the outcome. On Monday, Jennifer arrived at the cafe with David. Melissa knew immediately a decision had been made. "Melissa, this is my husband, David." "Nice to meet you," David said, extending his hand. "Jennifer told me everything." "And what have you decided?" Jennifer and David exchanged glances. "We decided I'll talk to my father, but I want him to come here. If he really wants to reconcile, he needs to take the first step. He'll be overjoyed, I'm sure he'll come. But there's one condition," Jennifer continued. "I want you to come too. If you're the one who brought us to this point, it's only fair you're there for the reconciliation." Melissa felt tears welling up. She hadn't expected to be so warmly included in this family moment. When she returned to the United States and told Richard about the conversation with Jennifer, he cried like a child. He immediately began planning the trip to London. "Melissa, how can I ever thank you?" "No need to thank me. Just be happy with your daughter." A week later, Melissa and Richard were on a plane to London. During the flight, Richard was visibly nervous. What if she changed her mind? What if seeing me just reminds her of all the pain? "Mr. Richard, your daughter is an intelligent and kind-hearted woman. If she decided to give this chance, it's because she truly wants to reconcile. The reunion took place at the same cafe where Melissa had spoken with Jennifer. Richard arrived first, accompanied by Melissa, and waited at a table near the window. When Jennifer appeared, even from a distance, Melissa noticed the emotion on Richard's face. He stood up slowly, his hands trembling more than usual from nerves. Jennifer approached, also visibly emotional. Father and daughter stared at each other for a few seconds before she spoke. "Hi, Dad." "Hi, my daughter." And then they hugged. A long embrace, full of longing and regret. Melissa discreetly stepped back, giving them space for their private moment. When she returned to the table, she found father and daughter deep in conversation. "Dad, why didn't you tell me about the illness?" "Because I was afraid you'd come back out of pity, not love." "Did you really think I'd do that?" "No, daughter. I think I was afraid to admit the situation to myself." The conversation lasted hours. Jennifer talked about her new life in London, her work as a translator, and how she met David in a Portuguese class for foreigners. He'd only been here 3 months trying to learn the language to find work. When he found out I was from the United States, he asked if I could help him. "And you fell for your student?" "I fell for his determination, for how hard he worked every day, studying Portuguese at night, sending every spare penny to his family back in the United States." Richard lowered his eyes, ashamed. "Daughter, I need to apologize for everything I said about David. I was wrong." "Dad, you were trying to protect me. I understand that now, but in the wrong way, and I ended up losing 2 years of your life." "We didn't lose them, Dad. We're here now." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. David arrived in the late afternoon and was formally introduced to Richard. At first, there was some awkwardness, but soon the two men were talking naturally. "Mr. Richard, I want you to know, I love your daughter more than anything in the world." "I can see that, David, and I apologize for doubting you." "No need to apologize. I'd be protective too if I had a daughter." During the 5 days they spent in London, Richard had the chance to get to know his daughter's new life better. He saw the small apartment she shared with David, met the friends she'd made, and visited the places that had become special to her. "Daughter, are you happy here?" "I am, Dad. For the first time in my life, I feel truly free to be who I am. And that's all I've ever wanted for you. I just took too long to realize it." On the last day of the trip, Jennifer announced a surprise. "Dad, David and I have decided we want to return to the United States." Richard was surprised and moved. "You'd do that?" "Not because of money or inheritance," said David. "We want to return because family should be together, especially in hard times. And also because I realized I left home out of pride, not conviction," Jennifer added. On the flight back to the United States, Richard confided his plans to Melissa. "Melissa, I want to make some important changes in my life, and I need your help." "What kind of changes?" "I want to use some of my money to do something that truly matters, something that helps people like you." "How so?" "I want to create a foundation that offers scholarships to workers who want to improve their skills, starting with you." Melissa was surprised. "Mr. Richard, I don't need charity." "It's not charity, Melissa, it's recognition. You've done more for me in 2 months than many people have in years of knowing me. But I don't know if I have time to study. Then we'll find a way. Maybe an evening class, maybe an online course. The important thing is that you have this opportunity." When they arrived in the United States, Richard immediately began putting his plans into action. First, he sought out a trusted lawyer to legalize the foundation's status and protect himself from greedy relatives. Jennifer and David returned to the United States a month later and temporarily settled in Richard's mansion. His daughter's presence brought a completely new energy to the house, which had been empty for so long. "Dad, this house is too big for just one person." "It really is. I was thinking of selling it and buying something smaller, or turning it into something useful." "What do you have in mind?" "How about using part of the house as the foundation's headquarters, and another part as space for classes and workshops?" Richard was delighted with the idea. Within weeks, The mansion was being renovated to become a center for education and professional training. Melissa, meanwhile, had enrolled in an evening business administration course encouraged by Richard and Jennifer. She continued working as a sanitation worker during the day, but now with a completely different outlook on the future. It was during this time that something unexpected happened. One day, when Melissa arrived at the mansion for one of the foundation's meetings, she found Richard talking to an elegant woman in her mid-50s. "Melissa, I'd like you to meet someone very special. This is Elizabeth Parker, an old friend." Elizabeth extended her hand to Melissa with a warm smile. "Nice to meet you, Melissa. Richard has told me all about you. It's an honor to meet the person who brought Richard back to life." Melissa noticed Elizabeth's hesitation when referring to Richard and grew curious about their relationship. Over the following weeks, Elizabeth began visiting the mansion regularly, always helping with the foundation's projects. Melissa noticed a special closeness between her and Richard, and Jennifer confirmed her suspicions. "Melissa, Elizabeth was my father's great love in his youth. What happened between them? My grandparents didn't approve of the relationship. Elizabeth came from a modest family and worked as a teacher. To my grandparents, that wasn't enough for the heir to the family business. And your father gave in to the pressure? He was very young. He let the family convince him he was making the wrong choice. And now? Now he's old enough and experienced enough to know what really matters." Melissa was happy to see Richard opening his heart to love again. Elizabeth was a cultured, kind woman, and it was clear there were still feelings between them. "Elizabeth, can I ask you something?" Melissa said one afternoon as they worked together, organizing the foundation's projects. "Of course, dear. Why did you come back, after so many years?" Elizabeth smiled sadly. "Because I never stopped loving Richard. When I read in the papers about his illness, I realized it didn't matter what happened in the past. He needed to know he wasn't alone." "And you don't hold any resentment?" "I did for a long time. But when you reach your 50s, you realize life is too short to spend it holding grudges." Elizabeth's return to Richard's life wasn't easily accepted by everyone. The greedy relatives, already unsettled by Jennifer's return, grew even more concerned about Elizabeth's presence. It was Melissa who uncovered the new conspiracy. During one of her visits to the mansion, she overheard Richard's brother, Robert, on the phone with one of their cousins. "Now it's gotten even harder. With his daughter back and this Elizabeth in the picture, we can't convince him to sign anything anymore." "Maybe it's time we take more drastic measures," replied the voice on the other end of the line. "What do you mean?" "A well-crafted medical report, some testimonies about his erratic behavior. We could get him declared incompetent even against his will." Melissa was horrified. They really intended to declare Richard mentally unfit against his wishes. That night, she told everything to Richard, Jennifer, and Elizabeth. "We need to prepare legally," said Jennifer, furious. "This is attempted fraud." "I'm already handling it," said Richard. "My lawyer is preparing full documentation to prove my mental and physical capacity to manage my affairs. But they could try to falsify medical reports," warned Elizabeth. "Then we'll get our own reports from reputable and recognized doctors." Melissa suggested something that surprised everyone. "What if we recorded their conversations, to have proof of what they're planning?" "Melissa, that would be too dangerous," said Jennifer. "Not if I do it right. They don't suspect me. They think I'm just a simple employee." After much debate, they decided Melissa would try to gather evidence of Richard's relatives' intentions. It was a risky but necessary plan. Over the next 2 weeks, Melissa made sure to be present whenever Robert or the cousins visited the mansion. She managed to record several incriminating conversations where they openly discussed how they'd declare Richard incompetent. The situation reached its peak when Robert showed up at the mansion with 2 men in suits, introducing them as psychiatrists. "Richard, these doctors are here to evaluate your mental condition." "What evaluation? Who requested this?" "It's standard procedure for someone with your medical history." Richard eyed the men suspiciously. "I didn't request any evaluation, and I won't submit to one." "Richard, you're being irrational. It's for your own good." That's when Melissa appeared with a recorder in hand. "Mr. Robert, Would you like to explain to these doctors how you plan to use their evaluation to try and take your brother's assets?" Then she played one of the most damning recordings, where Robert detailed to one of the cousins how they'd use fake medical reports to get Richard declared incompetent. The doctors' expressions changed completely. One of them turned to Robert. "Sir, if I understand correctly, you're asking us to conduct a fraudulent evaluation." "No, that's not it," stammered Robert. "That's exactly it," said Richard, who had recovered from his initial shock. "And you're both witnesses to an attempted scam against me." The doctors left immediately, and Robert stormed out of the mansion visibly embarrassed and furious. "Melissa, you were amazing," said Jennifer. "Now we have enough evidence to protect ourselves legally," added Elizabeth. But Robert and the cousins didn't give up easily. A few weeks later, they hired a lawyer and filed a formal petition to have Richard declared incompetent. The legal battle was long and exhausting. For months, Richard had to undergo medical, psychiatric, and psychological evaluations to prove his mental soundness. Melissa, Jennifer, and Elizabeth stood by him through every hearing, every doctor's appointment, every legal step. The pressure was immense, especially because Richard's neurological condition was indeed progressing, making some days harder than others. "Dad, you can't let them see you weak," Jennifer said on one of the toughest days. "Sweetheart, I can't pretend I'm fine when I'm not." "I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking to show that even with the illness, you're still capable of making your own decisions." Melissa had an idea that proved crucial to the case. "Mr. Richard, what if we documented an entire day of your life, showed how you function normally, how you make decisions, how you interact with people?" "What do you mean?" "A video, showing a normal day for you. That would be much more convincing proof than any medical report." The idea was accepted, and they filmed a homemade documentary of a full day in Richard's life. The video showed him having breakfast, reading newspapers, making decisions about the foundation, and conversing coherently and lucidly about various topics. When the video was presented in court, it had a tremendous impact. It was impossible to watch those images and consider Richard mentally incapable. The case ended with a complete victory. The judge not only denied the guardianship request, but also warned Robert and the cousins about the legal consequences of fraudulent attempts to seize someone else's property. This case clearly shows that having a medical condition doesn't mean being unable to manage one's own life, the judge said in his final ruling. The victory was celebrated at the mansion with a small but very meaningful gathering. Present were Richard, Jennifer, David, Elizabeth, Melissa, and Mrs. Dorothy, who had been specially invited for the occasion. "Melissa, I'd like to make an announcement," Richard said during the toast. "What announcement, Mr. Richard?" "I want to officially appoint you as the executive director of the foundation, with a competitive salary and all employment benefits." Melissa was surprised and moved. "Mr. Richard, I haven't even finished college yet, and when you do, you'll be even more qualified, but you've already proven you have the most important qualities: character, dedication, and heart." "I accept," Melissa said with tears in her eyes. "And I'd like to make an announcement too," Jennifer said. "David and I have decided we're going to live permanently in the United States, and we want to buy a house nearby to always be close to family." Richard was overjoyed. Having his daughter back permanently was more than he had ever dreamed of. "And I also have an announcement," Elizabeth said, blushing slightly. Everyone looked at her expectantly. "Richard proposed to me yesterday and I said yes." The celebration became even more emotional. Melissa hugged Elizabeth warmly. "I'm so happy for you and for Mr. Richard." "Thank you, dear. You know you played a big part in all of this." "How so?" "You're the one who brought love back into his life. First with Jennifer, now with me." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following months were filled with intense activity. The foundation was growing rapidly, already offering vocational training courses to hundreds of people. Melissa had graduated with honors in business administration and was applying all her knowledge to managing the projects. Richard and Elizabeth married in a simple and touching ceremony held in the mansion's garden, Jennifer was the maid of honor, and Melissa was in charge of organizing all the party details. "Melissa, how can I thank you for everything you've done for our family?" Jennifer asked during the wedding reception. "Seeing you happy is the greatest thanks, Jennifer." "No, that's not enough. You've completely changed our lives." During the party, David approached Melissa. "Melissa, can I talk to you privately?" "Of course, David." They stepped away to a quieter corner of the garden. "I want to tell you something you might not know." "What is it?" "My grandfather was also a sanitation worker in New York City. He worked for the same company as you." Melissa was stunned. "Really?" "Seriously. He always said that a person's dignity isn't in the profession they hold, but in how they perform any profession. Your grandfather was a wise man." "He was. And I think he'd be proud to know that a sanitation worker was responsible for bringing our family together." Melissa felt a deep emotion. It was as if everything was part of a greater plan, as if all the pieces fit perfectly. Over the following months, the foundation expanded its activities. In addition to professional training courses, it began offering free legal consultations, psychological support, and assistance for people going through family difficulties. "Melissa, I want to create a special program," Richard said during one of their planning meetings. "What kind of program?" "A family reconciliation program to help people going through situations similar to what I experienced with Jennifer." "That's a wonderful idea. So many families break apart over misunderstandings that could be resolved with dialogue." "Exactly, and you'd be the ideal coordinator for this program." Melissa accepted the challenge, and the Family Reconciliation Program became one of the Foundation's most sought-after services. She applied the same principles she had used with Richard and Jennifer: active listening, neutral mediation, and a lot of patience. One of the most memorable cases was Mrs. Martha's, a 75-year-old woman who hadn't spoken to her 3 children in over 10 years because of an inheritance dispute. "Melissa, my children think I'm a stubborn old woman, and maybe they're right. Mrs. Martha, what really matters to you? Being right or having your family back?" "Having my family back, but I don't know how to take the first step." "The first step is always the hardest, but it's also the most important." Melissa worked for weeks with Mrs. Martha and her children, first separately, then together. The process was long and sometimes painful, but it ended with a moving reconciliation on the woman's 76th birthday. "Melissa, you're an angel," Mrs. Martha said at the end of the birthday celebration, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. "Just someone who believes in the power of love and forgiveness." Melissa's reputation as a family mediator grew, and she began receiving invitations to speak at events about reconciliation and conflict resolution. During one of these talks, something unexpected happened. At the end of the event, a man approached her. "Melissa Johnson." "Yes, that's me." "My name is Harold Miller. I'm your father." Melissa felt the world spin. She hadn't seen her father in over 20 years. He had abandoned her and her mother when she was just a child. How did you find me?" "I saw a news story about you on TV, about the work you do with families. And I thought, maybe it was time to try to reconcile with my own family." Melissa didn't know what to feel. Anger, sadness, curiosity, all at once. "Why now? After all these years?" "Because I'm old, Melissa. I'm 68, I have health problems, and I realize I'll spend the last years of my life alone because of the mistakes I made." "And you think it's that simple? That you can show up after over 20 years and ask for forgiveness?" "No, I don't think it's simple. I know it's nearly impossible, but I had to try." Melissa looked at the man who had once been her father. He was visibly aged, white hair, simple clothes, deep sadness in his eyes. "I need to think, and I need to talk to my mother." "I understand. If you want, here's my number. But if you don't want to reach out, I'll understand that too." That night, Melissa had a long conversation with Mrs. Dorothy about the unexpected reappearance of her ex-husband. "Mom, what do you think? Should I give him a chance?" "Honey, I can't make that decision for you. But I can tell you one thing. Holding on to resentment for years only hurt me. Maybe it's time to let it go. Would you forgive him? My dear, I forgave him a long time ago. Because I realized staying angry was only hurting me. Melissa spent days thinking about the situation. It was ironic that she, who helped so many families reconcile, now had to face her own family issue. She decided to meet Harold Miller in a park near her home. When he arrived, Melissa noticed he was even more nervous than she was. Melissa, thank you for agreeing to see me. I still don't know if I made the right decision. I understand. I want you to know I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. Then why are you here? Because I want you to know I regret abandoning you. Every single day of my life I regret it. And why didn't you come back sooner? Shame, fear, cowardice. Melissa saw tears in her father's eyes and felt her own anger begin to dissolve. What did you do all these years? I worked in different cities, different jobs. I tried to build other families, but I never could. Always thinking about you and your mother. Do you have other children? No. I could never be a real father to anyone after I left you. The conversation lasted hours. Harold told her about his regrets, the sleepless nights spent thinking about his daughter, how he had followed some of her achievements from afar through mutual acquaintances. Dad, Melissa said the word for the first time in over 20 years. I can't just pretend nothing happened. I know, my dear. But I can try to forgive. For me, for Mom, and for you too. Harold cried like a child. You called me Dad. That's what you are, even with all the mistakes. Reconciling with her father wasn't easy or quick. It took months of conversations, gradual reunions, slowly rebuilding a relationship that had been broken for so long. Mrs. Dorothy initially resisted the idea of seeing her ex-husband, but eventually agreed to meet with Melissa present. Harold, you hurt our daughter deeply. I know, Dorothy. And I know I can't undo that. No, you can't. But you can try to be a better father from now on. The parents' reunion was tense but civil. There was no chance of romantic reconciliation, but they managed to establish a respectful relationship for their daughter's sake. Richard, when he learned about Melissa's situation, offered his full support. Melissa, if you need time to deal with this family matter, the foundation can wait. Thank you, Mr. Richard. But honestly, working here with family reconciliation is helping me handle my own situation. You're a very strong person, Melissa. I'm learning that we're all stronger than we think. Gradually, Harold was reintegrated into Melissa and Mrs. Dorothy's lives. He moved to New York City, found a simple job as a doorman, and started visiting them regularly. During one of these visits, he met Richard and Elizabeth, who were impressed by the man's kindness and humility. Melissa, your father seems like a good-hearted man, Elizabeth remarked. Yes, I think he really has changed. And I'm learning that sometimes people deserve a second chance. A year after the family reconciliation, Melissa received an unexpected offer. A university in New York City wanted to hire her as a guest professor to teach about family mediation and conflict resolution. A professor? I barely finished my degree. Melissa, you have practical experience no book can teach, the course coordinator said. Your family reconciliation methods are being studied by researchers in the field. Melissa accepted the invitation and discovered she loved teaching. Her classes were always full, and the students were fascinated by the real-life cases she presented. During one of these classes, she shared the story of her own family reconciliation, and a student asked a question that deeply touched her. Professor, how do you manage to forgive someone who hurt you so much? Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or pretending nothing happened. Forgiving means freeing yourself from the weight of resentment. But isn't it hard? It's very hard. But holding on to anger and resentment is even harder. It's like carrying a heavy stone everywhere you go. Melissa's reputation as a family reconciliation specialist spread, and she began receiving invitations from other cities to give lectures and teach courses. Richard, Recognizing the potential for expanding Melissa's work, suggested that the foundation create a program to train family mediators to meet demands across the country. Melissa, you could train others to do the same work you do. That's an interesting idea. We could help so many more families that way. The program was launched and became a huge success. Within 2 years, there were mediators trained by Melissa working in over 20 cities across the United States. During this time, Melissa's own life also changed in other ways. She met Michael, a psychologist who worked at the foundation, and they began a serious relationship. Michael was a 35-year-old man, divorced and the father of an 8-year-old girl. What impressed Melissa most about him was his dedication to his daughter and his commitment to social work. "Melissa, can I ask you a personal question?" Michael said during one of their meetings. "Of course. Why did you never marry? A woman like you." "I think I was too focused on work, family, helping others. I never stopped to think about my own love life. And now, are you thinking about it?" Melissa smiled. "I'm starting to." The relationship progressed naturally. Michael introduced his daughter, Emma, to Melissa, and the two got along immediately. "Aunt Melissa, are you going to be my new mum?" Emma asked with the sincerity of a child. "Emma, I won't replace your mother, but I can be your special friend." "That's great. Daddy is so much happier when you're here." Richard and Elizabeth watched Melissa's romance with joy. "She deserves to be happy," Elizabeth said to her husband. "She really does, after everything she's done for us for so many families. Do you think they'll get married?" "I think so, and I think they'll be a very happy family." Richard's prediction came true. Michael proposed to Melissa during a romantic dinner at the foundation, in the garden where so many families had reconciled. "Melissa, you've brought entire families back to harmony. Now I want to build a family with you." "Michael, I accept, but you know my work is very important to me. And that's exactly why I want to marry you, because I admire your dedication, your generosity, your heart." The wedding took place at Richard's mansion, in a ceremony that brought together all the people who had marked Melissa's journey. Present were Richard and Elizabeth, Jennifer and David, Mrs. Dorothy, Harold Miller, Michael and Emma, along with dozens of families who had been helped by Melissa's work. "Melissa, when I first met you, I thought I was hiring an assistant," Richard said during his best man speech. "But in truth, I was gaining a daughter. And when I saw a sanitation worker picking up trash on my street, I thought I was just seeing another worker," Elizabeth added. "But in truth, I was seeing an angel in disguise." The most emotional speech came from Mrs. Dorothy. "My daughter, you've always been special, but it took time for the world to see it. Today, seeing so many people you've helped, so many you've saved, I'm certain I raised a daughter who makes a difference in the world." After the wedding, Melissa, Michael and Emma moved into a house near the foundation. The new family adjusted quickly, and Emma became a constant presence at the foundation, helping where she could and learning about the work of family reconciliation. "Aunt Melissa, when I grow up, I want to do the same work as you." "Emma, you can do whatever work you choose. What matters is that it makes you happy and helps others." "But I want to help families too." "Then let's study hard so you can do an even better job than I have." 5 years after Melissa and Richard first met, the foundation had become a national reference for family reconciliation and professional training. Over 5,000 people had benefited from its programs, and hundreds of families had been reunited. Richard, despite the progression of his illness, remained active and involved, always supported by Elizabeth. His condition had stabilized somewhat, and doctors believed the emotional support of his family had significantly slowed the symptoms. "Doctor, how do you explain this stabilization?" Elizabeth asked during an appointment. Elizabeth, medicine still has much to learn about the power of positive emotions in the progression of illness. Richard has something many patients lack: a very strong reason to live. Jennifer and David had bought a house in the same neighborhood as the foundation and were regular participants in all its activities. Jennifer had returned to work as a translator, but now she provided services for social organizations. "Dad, you can't imagine how rewarding it is to use my language skills to help vulnerable people." "Oh, I can imagine, my dear. It's the same feeling I get every day watching the foundation's work grow. Harold, in turn, had become one of the foundation's most dedicated volunteers. His job was to help maintain the space and provide logistical support for events. Melissa, working here makes me feel like I'm finally contributing to something meaningful. Dad, you've always been important. You just needed to find your place. My place is helping you help others. This is how I can make up for lost time. One evening in June, Richard gathered the whole family at his home for a special dinner. There was a mysterious expression on his face. Everyone, I have some important announcements to make. All eyes turned to him. First announcement. Elizabeth and I have decided to renew our wedding vows in a bigger ceremony, so we can include all of you as family. Applause and joyful exclamations followed. Second announcement. The foundation will receive a donation of $10 million from an American businessman who learned about our work through a documentary made about our activities. More applause. Third announcement. Jennifer and David are going to make me a grandfather. She's pregnant. The table erupted with emotion. Richard cried with joy. Elizabeth hugged Jennifer tenderly, and Melissa felt overwhelming happiness seeing this family united and thriving. And I have an announcement too, Melissa said, looking at Michael. What announcement? Richard asked. Michael and I are also expecting a baby. This time, the emotion was even greater. Richard stood up from his chair despite the difficulties of his illness and held Melissa in a long embrace. My daughter, you never stop bringing me joy. Mr. Richard, it's you who never stops giving me reasons to be happy. The months that followed were filled with intense preparation. The vow renewal of Richard and Elizabeth was planned for the same day as the inauguration of the foundation's new headquarters, a 3-story building that had been specifically constructed to house all their programs. Jennifer and Melissa kept exchanging experiences about pregnancy, and Emma was beyond excited at the prospect of having 2 new cousins. Aunt Melissa, what will the babies be like? We don't know yet, Emma. They could be boys or girls. I hope they're girls so I can teach them important things. What kind of important things? Like how to be strong, how to help people, how to keep the family together. Michael listened to the conversation and smiled. Emma, you're already so wise for a 9-year-old. I learned from Aunt Melissa and Grandpa Richard. Richard had officially become Emma's adoptive grandfather, and she affectionately called him Grandpa. On the day of the vow renewal and the inauguration of the new headquarters, over 500 people were present. Besides family and friends, there were representatives from other social organizations, local authorities, and dozens of families who had benefited from the foundation's work. Today isn't just the day of Richard and Elizabeth's vow renewal, Melissa said during the opening speech. It's the day we celebrate the power of second chances, forgiveness, and reconciliation. The vow renewal ceremony was deeply moving. Richard and Elizabeth, surrounded by the family they had built and rebuilt, promised each other eternal love once again. Elizabeth, 40 years ago, I made the mistake of letting family pull me away from you, Richard said during the vows. Today, with our true family by our side, I promise nothing will ever separate us again. Richard, you taught me that true love is worth waiting for. No matter how much time passes, if it's meant to be, it always finds a way. After the ceremony, the new foundation headquarters was officially inaugurated. The building had classrooms for courses, offices for counseling, a community library, and even a small auditorium for lectures and events. Melissa, would you like to say a few words about the foundation's future? Richard asked. Melissa stepped onto the makeshift stage in the garden. 5 years ago, I was a sanitation worker picking up trash on the streets. I never imagined I'd be here today, speaking about an organization that helps thousands of people. It taught me that life can change completely when we least expect it. She paused, looking at everyone present. But the most important thing I've learned is that true wealth isn't in money, power, or social status. True wealth is in the human connections we build, the love we give and receive, the difference we make in others' lives. Enthusiastic applause followed. Richard Sullivan taught me that a rich man who is alone is, in truth, very poor, and that a simple person surrounded by love is truly rich. Richard wiped tears from his eyes. That's why our foundation's commitment isn't just to help people with professional qualifications or family conflicts. Our commitment is to remind everyone that family, whether by blood or by heart, is the most important thing we have. In the following months, the new headquarters remained constantly busy. Programs expanded, new courses were created, and the number of families served grew exponentially. Melissa, even while pregnant, continued working tirelessly, always supported by Michael and the family. "Melissa, you need to rest more," Mrs. Dorothy said, concerned. "Mom, I do rest, but there's so much important work happening. The most important thing right now is that you and my grandchild stay well." "You're right, but it's hard to stop when you see so many people in need." It was during this time that something unexpected happened. Robert, Richard's brother who had tried to take his assets, showed up at the foundation asking to speak with Richard. "Robert, what are you doing here?" asked Richard, visibly surprised. "Richard, I need to talk to you. It's important." Richard hesitated but agreed to meet him in his office at the foundation. "Richard, I came to apologize." "Apologize? After everything you tried to do?" "Yes, after everything, because I realized I was completely wrong." Richard looked at his brother with suspicion. "What do you want, Robert?" "I don't want anything. In fact, I want to offer something." "Offer what?" "My share of our father's inheritance. I want to donate it to the foundation." Richard was stunned. "Are you serious?" "I am. Richard, my wife left me. My kids won't speak to me anymore. I lost friends, I lost people's trust, all because of greed. And now you come here. Now I come here because I saw how happy you are. I saw how your life has changed. I saw the wonderful work being done here." Richard was silent for a moment. "Robert, I don't know if I can trust you." "I understand, but I'm not asking for trust. I'm just offering a way to try to make up for the harm I've done. I need to talk to my family about this." "Of course, and Richard, thank you for seeing me." That night, Richard told the whole family about Robert's unexpected visit. "Dad, it could be a trap," said Jennifer, always cautious. "It could," Richard agreed, "but it could also be an opportunity for reconciliation." "What do you all think?" asked Elizabeth. Melissa, who had been listening to the conversation, spoke up. "Mr. Richard, you've always taught me that everyone deserves a second chance. Maybe it's time to apply that to your brother too." "But Melissa, after everything he did, exactly because of everything he did, if he's truly sorry, giving him this chance could be important for both of you. And if it's a lie, then at least you'll know you tried. And if it's true, you could regain a brother." After much debate, Richard decided to accept Robert's proposal, but with clear conditions. "Robert, I accept your donation, but I want it done officially, with legal documents in the presence of lawyers." "Of course, whatever you say. And I want you to understand that this doesn't automatically erase everything that happened. Trust is something that will have to be rebuilt over time." "I understand. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Robert's donation was formalized, and with the additional resources, the foundation was able to expand its activities even further. New programs were created, including one specifically for sibling reconciliation. Gradually, Robert was reintegrated into the family. The process was slow and sometimes difficult, but always mediated by Melissa, who applied her family reconciliation techniques. "Melissa, how are you so patient with a situation like this?" asked Elizabeth. "Because I've lived it with my own father. I know how hard it is to forgive, but I also know how freeing it is when we manage to." 3 months before Melissa's baby was born, Jennifer gave birth to a beautiful girl, named Elizabeth in honor of her beloved stepmother. Richard was overjoyed at the arrival of his granddaughter. "Elizabeth, look, she has Jennifer's eyes and David's smile. And her great-grandmother's hands," joked Mrs. Dorothy, who had officially become the grandmother of this blended family. Little Elizabeth's arrival brought even more joy to the family. Richard, despite his illness, made sure to be involved in every moment with his granddaughter. "Grandpa, do you want to hold her?" asked Jennifer. "I do, but I'm afraid I'll drop her. Let's sit you in a comfortable chair. This way you can hold her without worry." 2 weeks later, Melissa went into labor. Michael accompanied her to the hospital, and the whole family kept vigil waiting for news. After 12 hours of labor, a healthy baby boy was born, named Richard Johnson Thompson, in honor of the man who had completely changed Melissa's life. "Richard, you have a namesake," Elizabeth said when they arrived at the hospital to meet the baby. Richard was too emotional to speak. He looked at that tiny baby who bore his name and felt as if his entire life had been worth it for that moment. "Melissa, thank you for this honor. Mr. Richard, it's the least I can do for the person who gave me the chance at a completely new life." In the months that followed, the foundation continued to grow. With 2 babies in the family, the activities became even more special, as the children brought contagious energy and joy to the environment. Emma, now 10 years old, had become the official babysitter for the 2 babies and took her responsibilities very seriously. "Aunt Melissa, Richard Jr. is crying. I think he's hungry." "Thank you, Emma. You're such a special helper. When I grow up, I want to have lots of children to take care of. And I'm sure you'll be a wonderful mother." A year after the 2 babies were born, Richard gathered the whole family again for a special dinner. "Everyone, it's time for me to make some important announcements." They were all used to Richard's surprise announcements by now. First announcement. The foundation has just received recognition from the federal government as one of the most efficient social organizations in the country. Enthusiastic applause. Second announcement. We've been invited to expand our work to other countries in Latin America. More applause. Third announcement. Elizabeth and I have decided we want to officially adopt Emma as our granddaughter. Emma, who had been playing with the babies, looked up in surprise. "Grandpa, does that mean I'll officially be part of the family?" "You already are, Emma. This is just to make it official on paper what's already in our hearts." Michael was moved. "Richard, Elizabeth, I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank us. Emma has brought so much love into our lives." "And I have the final announcement," Melissa said, looking at Michael. "Michael and I have decided we want more children." "More children?" Mrs. Dorothy asked, surprised. "Yes, we want to adopt a child who needs a family." Richard clapped excitedly. "Melissa, you never cease to amaze me with your generosity. I learned from you that when we have so much love to give, we should share it." In the years that followed, Melissa's family continued to grow in different ways. They adopted 2 children, a 5-year-old boy and a 7-year-old girl, siblings who had lost their parents in an accident. The foundation expanded to Canada, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic, always maintaining its focus on family reconciliation and professional development. Richard, despite the progression of his illness, remained active and present, always supported by Elizabeth and the whole family. On a sunny December afternoon, 5 years after the babies were born, Melissa sat in the foundation's garden watching Richard play with the children. He used a wheelchair now, but his joy and vitality remained unchanged. "Mr. Richard, do you remember the day we met?" "How could I forget? The day my life changed completely." "Mine too. I never imagined picking up trash at a mansion could lead to all this." "Melissa, you weren't just picking up trash. You were planting seeds of dignity, honest work, and character. I just recognized it. And now we have a beautiful family, a foundation that helps thousands of people. We have love, Melissa. That is the only thing that truly matters." At that moment, all the children came running toward them. Emma, now 15, was carrying little Elizabeth, who was 5. Richard Jr., 4 years old, was holding hands with his adoptive siblings, 9-year-old Matthew and 11-year-old Lily. "Grandpa Richard, Grandma Elizabeth is calling everyone for snack time," said Emma. "Then let's go. We can't keep Grandma Elizabeth waiting." As they headed inside the house, Melissa looked back and saw the foundation's sign, "Richard Sullivan Family Reconciliation Center, where families are reborn." She smiled, picked up Richard Jr., and walked on with her family, the family that had begun so unexpectedly one March morning when a sanitation worker and a businessman met and discovered that true wealth lies in the love we share with one another. The end of the story. So, dear listeners, What did you think of this incredible story of Melissa and Richard? A simple sanitation worker who transformed not only her own life, but the life of an entire family. Tell us in the comments which part of the story moved you the most and whether you believe Melissa made all the right decisions. Your opinion means so much to us. Don't forget to like if the story touched your heart, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other heartwarming stories like this one.